That's what I loved in Simon's prayer there. Anywhere else in the world, they'd be like, Lord, we just thank you for the sunshine. We thank you for the Northern Ireland. Lord, we just bless you for the rain and for the wind. It's like, and the lack of vitamin D or whatever that or deficiencies because we don't get enough sun. Here, let's stand. Here's my plan. I don't really have one, but gonna make it up. Just end of the week, start of the week, whatever way you want to see this, just take a big deep breath, right? I'm going to sing some songs that you'll know, we can all blast in. There's probably songs that you don't know. If you don't like them, just say you're at another church and it was someone else was singing them. But just take a moment, pause, and we just fix our eyes on Jesus, you know, and that's what it's always about. It's never about anything else. And we just join and believe for breakthrough together, whatever it is that we're all walking through. You know, it could be great stuff. You could have had the best week ever. You could have had the worst week. You know, you might have the best week ever. You might have the worst week ever. But you know, He's faithful. He sits. He rules and reigns above it all. He's got promises. He's still true. He's for us. And when God is for us, who can actually stand against us? And so that's. And then when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, right? This is a picture of worship that I just love. They all camped around the tabernacle, they all camped around the presence of God. It was central to who they were. And they lifted up banners, they lifted up their standards. And that's kind of what we're doing in worship. Yeah, we lift up truth over our circumstances. It doesn't negate whatever it is that we're walking through, but we just lift a greater standard over it all. And so Father, just thanks again. Thanks again that we do get to do this as Simon Pray. We get to join together as your church and just lift you above everything. May you be seen above it all this morning.
Who can stop the Lord Almighty?
darkness you shine, and out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you, there's none like you. Sing our God, and our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other, and our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Oh, into the darkness you shine, and out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you, there's none like you. And our God is greater, and our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other, and our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, sing our God, and our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other, and our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against? Oh, what could stand against your church, your people called by your name? Sing our God, oh, and our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other, and our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, sing our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other, and our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Sing this little chorus. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. With my soul, it is well, it is well with my soul. You are the name above all names. You are worthy It's to the world. For the broken, for the hurting, for the ones who cannot see, and we will not be quiet, and we will not cease. And Jesus, you are the hope of the world that leads us on. A burning bright in the darkest night, you lead us on. You lead us on to the world, to the world, to the world I'll go. Carrying, carrying, carrying your hope to the ends of the earth, till everybody knows this is all for you and you alone. This is all for you and you alone. To the world I'll go. To the world I'll go. Alright, for the broken. For the broken, for the hurting, for the ones who cannot see. And we will not be quiet, we will not cease. Jesus, you are the hope of the world that leads us on. Burning bright in the darkest night, you lead us on. You lead us on to the world, to the world, to the world I'll go. Carrying, carrying, carrying your hope to the ends of the earth, till everybody knows this is all for you and you alone. This is all for you and you alone. And we will be your hands and we'll be your feet. We'll be the love in need. Into a broken world we will go. Into a broken world we will go. Oh, for we will be your hands and we'll be your feet. We'll be the love we need. Into a broken world we will go. Into a broken world we will go. Oh, for we will be your hands and we'll be your feet. We'll be the love we need. Into a broken world we will go. Into the broken world we will go. To the world, to the world, to the world I'll go. Carrying, carrying, carrying your hope to the ends of the earth, till everybody knows this is all for you and you alone. This is all for you and you alone. To the world I'll go. To the world I'll go. It's like a rock outro. Right there. Right. Alright, let's do Jericho. So I do always like to say, please pray for me. I don't have 5 kids, I've been praying for you guys. So I have 3 girls, and I literally don't know what I'm doing, right? So 13-year-old, 11-year-old, and a mad 5-year-old downstairs, and then my wife. So I'm 4 to 1 outnumbered, right? And so when my eldest daughter was born, she was born with cystic fibrosis, so this genetic lung disease thing, and that's been kind of the journey of our life, you know, as a kid, just a small kid, like doing physiotherapy and all this kind of stuff. And you know, you have your first kid, which is just crazy enough in itself. Women for Palladius, but like then the doctors hand you this kid and the weight goes down and then it doesn't come back up again, and lo and behold, oh, isn't it great now though, kids with CF live into their 30s and stuff, and you're like, I don't know if that is good news, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, so you go on this journey of trying to figure the whole thing out, and I do not stand here as a theologian or anyone that has anything sorted out, I really don't. But she was 10 and a half years old, had never been in hospital apart from checkups, right? And so that in itself is a miracle. It was a Wednesday, We were at Slieve Dullion, right, and it was raining as always, and it was my family, a friend's family, and then we had a friend over from the States, just kind of hanging out with us for a bit. So kind of 3 families represented there. The phone call goes, and it's the specialists, and they're like, listen, because she had a bacteria in her lungs, and they're like, it's all clear, good to go, no sweat. So I ran and told her, she skipped off her wee skinny legs. It was just brilliant, right? It was like literally, because it was going to be 2 weeks in intensive care, like, you know, in treatment, like, you know, locked away in a room, long IV and all this kind of stuff. And we didn't want that, we really didn't. And then it was probably about 45 minutes, an hour later, Jill gets a phone call, and for some reason, I don't know, they went back, tested the thing again, looked at it again, and the bacteria was still there, and there was another one that was there as well. And so they kind of got it wrong, and so she basically had to go in. And it was a Wednesday night that I found out. And Jill started a Bible study in our house on a Wednesday night. So I'm already, I've numbered 4 to 1, and then all these like girls come round to my house on a Wednesday night. So I go and do something manly, like, I don't know, go fighting or something like that. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, go, you know, chop wood or something like that. Go climbing or something like that. Go skydiving. I don't know if that's manly or not. Skydiving for wishes. Bottles and all. Shut up. But I went to my mate's house in Dundonald, and I was genuinely gutted. Like, we were just absolutely wrecked, because it's not been the rhythm of our life, you know, just kind of like 2 weeks in isolation, you know, and sitting up in the hospital, just like, that's not been the rhythm of our life. And my mate Griff, who I wrote this song with, and my friend Jamie, we were just in this front room, and we just started, I know I get to do this and bounce around and whatever, but I love to worship, like, I genuinely do. Mad charismatic at heart. I could play 2 chords for like 5 hours and just sing to the Lord, right? Just keep going. And we used to start having this conversation in his front room, because his sister had half of her brain removed, you know, stopped seizures and all of this kind of stuff. And he was like, "What have you got questions?" I was like, "Man, I've got lots of questions for the Lord." Like, we, you know, and that ultimately became the first line of the song. To all our questions, there will be an answer. Because if we know and love the Lord, one day we're going to stand before Him, and in a moment, I think it's all going to make sense in a moment like that. And we began to just worship. And this song, this story of Jericho, this story of Joshua, you know, when God said to him, it was the first thing He did was to take this city. God said to him, "Go and take the city." And He said, "Walk around the walls once a day for 6 days, keep your mouth shut, 7 times on the 7th day," right? And on that last time, you make a loud noise, you lift up a shout, and now the walls will come down. I've given you the city. And so there was a promise that sat over that circumstance. And that's what it's like for us. Jericho sometimes feels like a big scary thing that's right in front of us. CF feels like a big scary Jericho. But there's a promise that sits. It doesn't mean that the Jericho just disappears, right? But it just changes how we walk, because if we keep our eyes on the promise rather than just this big scary wall that's right in front of us, it changes how you walk. There's a greater degree of rest, an active rest in the middle of walking around those walls. And so that's the backdrop for this song. You know, my encouragement is, whatever you're going through, whatever thing is right there, just hold on to the promise. You know, and if you struggle to hold on to the promise, get with people and go and find the promise. It's in the Word. It's somewhere in there. Do you know what I mean? Dig in. And Mr. God's not afraid of all of our questions, not at all. He invites the conversation. And in the middle of all of that, you know, we dare to believe, because it's a church is one body, that we can join together and see breakthrough, whatever your circumstance may be. So this is Jericho. Does that sound like a plan? That makes sense? Yeah.
Came down at Jericho.
your presence, resting in your presence, nowhere else we'd rather be, nowhere else we'd rather be, resting in your presence, resting in your presence. Amen. Just thinking about that actually. We were talking about with Sharon there, we were talking about Israel. I got to actually sing this song at Jericho this time last year, which was interesting. But one of the cool places we got to go was Caesarea Philippi. I don't know if you went there, but it's like 30 miles north of Galilee, right? And it's do you know the story whenever Jesus takes the disciples and he asks them, who do people say that I am, right? There's always an intentionality in the middle of all of this, right? And he takes the disciples, and I didn't know this, I'd heard the story loads of times before, but he takes the disciples to the center of paganism. That's what this place was, right? It was like the center of all other religions and all other gods, right? And Caesarea Philippi is it's actually a really pretty place. It's a really cool sort of cliff, right? And then there's this gorgeous stream kind of coming out of it. And they had like 2 pagan temples, right? One of which the doors then ultimately became known as the gates of hell, right? And they had all these there's holes carved into the rock, and so they would set their gods on them. And this would all be kind of going on whenever Jesus took his disciples there. And they would throw kids off the top, and then if the blood from the kids hit the water, then the gods were appeased and all of this stuff. So this is the backdrop where he takes his disciples, and he says, who do people say that I am? And then people are like, well, some say you're John the Baptist, some say you're this, yes, yes. And he says, who do you say I am? And that's when Peter gets it right. He's like, you're the Christ, you're the Son of the living God. And I just think that's a really cool picture. It's like in the backdrop of whatever you may be walking through, in the backdrop of fear, the backdrop of, losing a job, in the backdrop of sickness or whatever, who do we say God is in the middle of it? And the answer is still the same, is that he's the Christ. He's the Son of the living God. And so, Holy Spirit, my prayer this morning, wherever we need breakthrough, wherever we need to see victory in our lives, God Jesus, we actually stand on the fact that you are not dead and buried in the grave, but you're seated at the right hand of the Father. And you intercede on behalf of us. God, thank you that when you look at each and every one of us, you see your Son Jesus inside of us. Thank you that we stand in that victory today. But God, we have areas in our lives that we want to see breakthrough in. And I pray that as we join together as a church, that we see breakthrough. We see in that backdrop of whatever it is, that we can be people that still stand to say that you're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God, regardless of what it looks like in front of us. Regardless of what Jericho's in there. We hold on to the truth of who you are, and we just walk in that. Always for your glory, your fame, and your renown, nothing else.
But just as I was thinking about this morning, and quite often I have to be someone who thinks on my feet, because Aaron has landed me in so much trouble at times where I don't know I'm speaking sometimes, and he's like, oh, by the way, you're on this morning. So thankfully I had a little bit longer than 10 minutes to prepare. I've known for a couple of weeks that this was happening, but I've sat genuinely going, do you know when you just have a stockpile of sermons and I do, and I have a stockpile of sermons and going, I just want God to come and use me the best way he can to encourage you this morning. I think that's what the body of Christ is all about. It's about someone sharing song, it's about someone sharing the word, and then seeing where God is in the middle of that. And for us to just come and sing songs and talk, if he's not in it, it's kind of, what is the point? Like, genuinely, what is the point? And so I really prayed and was like, God, what's the thing for this community? What is this that you would have us speak? What has been our story? Is there something in us that we can share and hopefully encourage brothers and sisters in you? And I guess that I always land at this real easy place of like, what has been your biggest understanding in the faith? What has been your biggest wow moment? And let's just stick with that, because actually it's probably the thing that you're anointed to preach on, and it's probably the thing that you have a little bit of authority in because you've journeyed it. And so this morning, I guess my heart was that I would bring to you my big thing, my big thought when it comes to the kingdom of God. And for me, that simply is that we are people who understand what the kingdom of God is all about, and that we understand that in life, yes, we are physically here and we are physically present in a very physical world, but actually we are citizens of another kingdom, and that there is an eternal perspective over all things. We kind of sang about it this morning, but there is an eternal view that God has on the world. So what we see and feel and experience, there is so much more. And I think if we can wrap our heads around that, if we can begin to understand and see the world the way God sees the world, actually our time in the world is infinitely different, because how we view it really, really matters. And I guess that I wanted to just, off the back of singing Jericho, I wanted to just look at a really significant story in the Bible that I genuinely believe the story of Jericho has some incredible truths in it about how we get perspective in our lives. If you know where that story is positioned, it's literally, there is a whole book dedicated to Joshua. Aaron is reading the Bible very quickly at the minute and was like, it's all gory. Joshua's like just pure bloodshed everywhere. Joshua is the psycho warrior for the kingdom and kills all around him. But he literally does. That's the best summary of the book of Joshua. But right before Joshua starts, at the very, very end, Deuteronomy 34, something really, really significant has happened with the children of Israel. So the children of Israel are God's chosen people. God has handpicked them from the world to be the people of God, to be his special people in the world who are set apart from him, who he loves, and who he's going to bless the rest of the world through. That's their story, that's their game plan, that's God's narrative on the children of Israel. And Moses was their leader who was going to take them from a place of captivity into a place of freedom known as the Promised Land. And somewhere in the middle of his story, he is disobedient to God, and God says, right, that's it, you don't get to enter the Promised Land. And a whole generation misses out on a promise that God had spoken because of a person's disobedience. And sometimes even I read that story, I think, harsh, because like it's not like he did anything really, really bad. When I read it, it doesn't come across as really bad, but actually in light of the big picture, he just stopped believing God. And I think when we are people who stop believing God, we need to get worried, because actually Moses stopped believing that God's way was the best way and started to do things on his own, and started, well, we did that last time, we'll do that this time, and maybe it'll work. And he'd stopped the conversation. And God, if I've learned anything in the years I've been on this planet, God is more interested in your heart and your connection to him than he really is about what you do for him. Like, what you do matters, of course, but he is more interested in having a connection with you that is a father and son relationship. That's it. And so Moses had stopped the chat. Moses had just kind of went, well, we're here, we're in this great place, so we'll just copy what I've always seen. And he stopped the conversation, and I think that is why God was so harsh with them. He said, this is me at the centre, you've forgotten me. You've kind of got on this victory journey, and you've forgotten who I am in the middle of it, and you're just doing it all on your own. And I think that is why God, in my opinion, literally just decided, right, you don't get to go to my promised land because you've stopped listening to my heart. So at the very end of that chapter, that its children of Israel have been in mourning for 30 days, which is a long time when we think about mourning, as in we are publicly going to remember this person and cry for him for 30 days. They had lost somebody very, very significant. This was a person who had rescued them. He had, in a way, been a little bit of a messiah. He had rescued them from their bondage. And we kick off in Joshua. This honestly is one of my funniest and favourite verses in the Bible, because I go, obviously, but this is what it says in verse 1 in Joshua. It says, after the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, who was Moses' assistant, and he said to him, Moses, my servant, is dead. And everything in that, I go, you think? We've just been crying for him for 30 days, we kind of know that. But there's something where whenever you're in a state of shock or life has taken a turn, sometimes you just need to hear hard facts, reality. It's almost like a slap across the face. And Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore the time has come for you to lead these people across the Jordan. We're not going to sit and mourn for much longer. There is something else. I need you to take your eyes off what is and look to what's coming. There is a phrase that irritates the living daylights out of me, and my husband says it quite frequently, and it honestly makes me want, I always say it makes me want to high five him in the face with a chair, right? Because it's the most irritating thing, and it's this phrase, it is what it is. So usually when I'm having a meltdown about something, or life is kind of really bad, or stuff has happened, and us women just, well, me as a woman, not going to be that on all you females, but me as a female just want to talk about it in great detail and rant about it and complain about it and go on and on and on about this thing. And Aaron's like, would you ever shut up? It is what it is. What are you going to do about it? I just want to lavish and talking of it, but this happened and they said this and this happened. And he's like, Jill, it is what it is. Now the thing that is so true, it is what it is, I get irritated with it because there's something so final about it. There's something that's happened. So what? Are you going to sit and talk about what's happened, or are we going to go, what's God's however in the middle of it? And I love that, and that for me is what this kind of story is. It's like Moses is dead, however, therefore, I've got something for you to do. And there's sometimes circumstances in our lives where it is what it is. We have lost jobs, we have sick kids, we have sick parents, we have life throwing awful things at us. And it is what it is, however, God. And I love that. I love that God can come in and do something phenomenal. And I actually think he does his best work in it is what it is moments. Because we don't know how to fix it. We don't know what to do. And we're waiting on him and we're relying on him. And I actually think that the beautiful thing in all of this is that Joshua became that man who relied heavily on God and who got his word out again and who started to follow the ways of the Lord because his heart was connected back to God. And Joshua basically had this phenomenal journey to do, right? He had been Moses' right-hand man and had seen incredible things, but now here was his chance and his opportunity and his purpose in life was to now lead these people. And Aaron said it earlier when we were in worship, the thing about the children of Israel was in their, if we were to embellish the good in their story, they were people who camped around the presence of God. They were people who had God in their midst and had a focused view of him. But actually there are times in their story when they don't, when they aren't like that, and when they just kind of forget the goodness of their God in the middle of life. And you see this constant thing with them where they're fully in with God, and then they get all the good stuff and then they forget God. And then they realise, oh, life is really crap. We'll get back to the law. And I just think it is so, it's us. Like their story is our story because we are constantly, we're in with God, we need God, we get what we need from God, we forget his ways again. And God is constantly, the one thing that matters to him is that my heart's connected and that your heart is connected and that you don't forget who he is, even when it's good. Because that is the downfall in the children of Israel's story, is they forget his ways when it's all going good. But when they did camp around the presence, when they camped around God, the things that they camped around was the Ark of the Covenant. It was this special thing to them where God lived. And their experiences of God actually lived inside that box. What I mean when I say that, so 3 things were kept inside the Ark of the Covenant. The first one was the stone tablets. So the stone tablets that Moses had went and received on Mount Sinai lived in the Ark of the Covenant. And to me, they resemble God's promise, God's covenant with his people. The second thing that was in there was the manna that had been their substance, their survival food in the middle of their wilderness experience. And it was almost like God was going, please don't forget that I'm your provider. Please don't forget that I'm the one who did that for you. For 40 years, you did not go without. For 40 years, you woke up and I had given you your sustenance for that day. And it was a constant reminder to them. And then the third thing was the staff. was the staff that Moses used to perform a lot of the miracles of God. And to me, that was like a resemblance of God's power. And so an easy way for me to remember that is that the children of Israel were always led by the promises, the power, and the provision of God. A good preacher getting their 3 P's in there, like that. So the children of Israel, but that was their experience of who God is. And I want to dare to believe, actually, over my life, over your life, that He still does that. That He speaks with promise, with provision, and with power wherever you are. And it's a matter of trying to engage in a relationship with Him. So Joshua gets to lead the children of Israel, and the instructions are really clear. Even though they camped around and the presence of God was central, now it was going to be that they were going to cross the Jordan with the Ark of the Covenant leading. And like, we might go, really, we're relying on a box leading us there, but think what that box represents. It's God's promise, it's God's provision, and it's God's power, and that's what they are going to follow. But before they do that, Joshua has them consecrate themselves. He has them for a few days, he has them fasting and focused on the law and fixing their eyes on God. This isn't just a battle that's going to be, we're going to do it on our own strength. We need to fix our eyes, and there's something where it's our responsibility to do that. There's something in our, like, God never forces His work on us, but yet we have to engage with it. Not to the point that it's our effort producing it, but actually we are responsible to picture God, to view God, to read His Word, to engage with Him, and to maintain our side of the relationship. The grace in all of it is that God initiates everything, but actually we have to engage with the things of Him to be spiritually changed for Him. So there's really direct instructions for whenever they're crossing the Jordan. So this is before they get to Jericho, and I think that it's really significant. So it's Joshua 3:7-8. The Lord told Joshua, "Today I will begin to make you a great leader in the eyes of the Israelites. They will know that I'm with you, just as I was with Moses. Give this command to the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant. When you reach the banks of the Jordan, take a few steps into the river and stop there." There was something really significant about Joshua leading the children of Israel through water. This is the big thing in their story. The big narrative, big picture narrative in Israel's story is that God rescued them from Egypt, and He did it through the waters. And I actually think that there's something so significant that Joshua has to do the same. That he's going, we're still the people of Israel. Remember how God rescued us. Remember He's going to do it again. He had to be the leader that reminded them of their rescue, because it actually was a really pivotal moment in their story. But one of the things that I think about often in my own life, when I put myself into this scenario, if you were the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the instruction is to put your feet in, and then the water's going to go, right? And I wonder in my own life, right, would I genuinely be still standing there? Because I'm waiting on the water moving a wee bit, right? I'm waiting to see a little bit of dry before I take the risk and get my feet wet. And I think of my own journey of faith, and maybe you're the same, and you can picture this, but is there something that actually God needs us to operate in faith first before we see it? I think faith is faith because we're reminded and doing stuff that we don't see. And I wonder, would I actually still be standing waiting on the Jordan and waiting to see the path before I ever moved? And my question to you this morning is, are you prepared to get your feet wet? Are you prepared to activate something in the kingdom of God if God instructs you to do so? And my answer, the holy answer is to go, I would like to think I would, but let's be real. A lot of us want to see first. We want to see a little bit of God first before we go all in. But I love in this story that God reminds us, I do things differently from all of you. I need to see you trust me. I have told you this, therefore go and do it. And I love that when they do that, God does clear the way. But I often wonder how many of us would still be standing on the banks of the Jordan because we're waiting on God moving first. And He's just wanting to see, do you trust me? I've done this before, do you trust me? The significant part in that story is that as they're walking through the Jordan, the leaders of the tribes are called to go back and to lift a stone from the centre. And then on the other side, they're commanded to kind of build an altar that would remind people that God saved us from the Jordan. God saved us from a whole pile of water yet again. And it's to serve as a memory. It's to serve as like this moment where when everyone looks at it, they go, God did that, and that stone should be in the middle of a huge body of water, and here it is sitting here. And I think that the reason for it is that we are so prone to forget. We're so prone to forget that God is good, especially when we're having it really tough. And I think that honestly, the biggest encouragement in my life and my walk has literally been to set up little moments of like, God did this then. Because sometimes when you're going through your biggest battle, it is so easy to think, well, God's not real, God's not here, I'm praying, He ain't listening, He's not moving, I'm believing for this, I'm holding the word up and I'm not seeing anything. And where my crazy head goes, if I allow it to go that way, is probably, am I even a Christian anymore? Like literally, let's be honest about it. But actually, when I look at my life and I look at my history and I look at my journals and I go, actually, I felt like that then, but look what God did. And it's a reminder that God is always faithful to His promises. If He said it, He is going to do it. But the thing that I've discovered is it might not look like the way I thought it was going to look like. Because God is building a way bigger story than I ever could. And then, of course, what they do when they land on the other side, so they're about to take Jericho, and in their heads it's battleground. They're about to go into war with a city, and so God has them do something. He says, right, Joshua, we're going to circumcise every male because we haven't done that yet. And if ever there's a bad battle strategy, it is to maim the men just before they're about to go into battle. It just seems weird. I had a moment recently where I was researching the whole story of Abraham. I love the story of Abraham. I think it's amazing. I think when you see God's grace and like God calls him right before he is right, he becomes his friend. He is able to have a relationship before the law, right? And God calls him all of this stuff before Abraham ever does anything. I think it's a beautiful picture of God's grace in our lives. But one of the things that I never really had thought about until recently was that Abraham's biggest longing was obviously for a son. And God comes along and he makes promises to Abraham that he's going to not only have a son, but he's going to be the father of many nations. And it's a huge promise, and this man is old. And then God goes an extra bit and says to him, the very instrument that you need to bear a son, I want you to damage it. Do you hear what circumcision is all about? God's going, I am giving you a family. The very thing that you need to produce that family, I want you to damage. I want you to remove that little bit, right? And it almost, when you think about it in that way, God is going, are you going to rely on yourself, on your flesh, or are you going to rely on me? And I think that never really jumped out at me until recently. I'm going, he asks Abraham to literally cut himself there and then asks him to father a nation. It's like, that doesn't make sense. The very thing that is supposed to produce life, and God is constantly reminding, this is not about you or what you do, it's me. And I love that's the whole thing about circumcision. Every time it's mentioned in the Bible, it's like, this is not about you, this is about me. And this is what he's doing with Joshua. Again, he's going, this is not about you, this is about me. What you think you're going to take in your flesh, I'm about to do in my grace. And I think that is the promises and purposes and vision of God on his kingdom and in your life. So they go to Jericho, and it's the first massive problem that they've really encountered. Yes, the Jordan was a problem, but there wasn't anyone with swords in the middle of it. So Jericho is this city that becomes this issue for them. And the thing that I love about it is Aaron was sharing the journey about Lily being in the hospital. But I had this moment in the hospital where she's in bed, she's getting her drugs in, kind of being a little bit lazy and falling asleep. And I'm sitting reading this particular book called The Circle Maker by Mark Batterson. I don't know if you've ever read that book. He says a very flippant line in it that sets me off on a whirlwind of thoughts. And he was basically talking about the whole story of Jericho. And he was talking about how Joshua viewed Jericho really mattered. Like, was it a problem or was it a promise? Had God said, I've given you the city, or had he not said it? And the whole thing was, God had said, I have given you the city. So Jericho's not a problem, it is a promise. So whenever they're walking around the city of Jericho, for years and years, probably VeggieTales, to be honest, is the flaw in this picture, but I don't know if you've ever watched the VeggieTales version of Jericho. and you've got all the little peas like sitting up on the walls, like shouting down at the children of Israel, and they're like, all the other vegetables like are walking around the city, like looking up, like kind of like embarrassed of what they're doing. And it always was taught to me that way, that like they were taunting them and they're walking around in silence, and it was a massive deal. But actually God had promised it to them. And I started to think, like, if I'm walking around a city that's a problem, I'm going to be discouraged. I'm going to be, how on earth is this working? Like, seriously? Or if I'm walking around it as a promise, is my walk becoming a little bit more exciting? Oh, what's going to happen next? Okay, and I started to realise that for me and my story with Lily, am I walking around cystic fibrosis? Because when I walk around cystic fibrosis, it's really depressing. When I listen to doctors talk about it, it's really depressing. When I read news articles about it, it's really depressing. And I can walk around and go, oh, where are you in the middle of this? This is crap, like just not cool. And I just don't like this, and it becomes discouraging as I'm constantly viewing cystic fibrosis. But as I read this, I felt really challenged to go, okay, this isn't a problem. I need to start thinking about what I am walking around. Actually, what God has spoken over her, what God has spoken over our family is healing. So actually, I'm not walking around sickness, I'm walking around healing. And that little mind shift in my mind made such a difference. Because instead of going and walking around a problem, I'm circling a healing, and I don't know what lap I'm on, but it got a wee bit more exciting. It became less discouraging, and it became really, really exciting, because the way you view something determines how you walk around it. So if you've been dealt a bad hand, and if ever you think, oh, that's God, He's blessed me with this, and you know what, we have been told that in the past, that God saw us as a special couple who could, you know, blessed us with a sick child. And the more I read scripture, I go, God doesn't do that. Like, God doesn't bless you with awful things, but yet He turns everything for good. And the more I realised that, the more I realised that I need to shift my view. I need to start seeing the world the way God sees the world. So yes, there is a reality. We experience this, but actually God speaks a better word. And we stand in this gap and we go, right, what am I viewing? Because when I view this, it's terrible, but when I view the promises of God, I start to get a little bit more excited. So my whole thing has always been that hope has eyes. Hope sees things differently. Hope sees the world the way God sees the world. Romans 8:24 says this, for in this hope you were saved. Hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he sees? But yet hope has eyes. So I want to challenge your thinking and go, so how do you see the way God sees? How do you see things differently? Because it says that hope sees things. It talks about that in Hebrews. Hope views things differently. So if hope doesn't have eyes, how does hope see? And hope sees with the eyes of your heart. If I flick you back in the Old Testament to a story where Samuel is going to anoint the king, and he doesn't know who he's going to anoint, and he turns up to the house of Jesse, and he says this one statement in 1 Samuel 16, I think it's verse 6. He says, they came, and when he looked at Eliab, it says, Samuel saw him, and he thought, surely this is the one. And in this is this massive, massive principle to do with what we're looking at. So typically this is the way we work as human beings. We see something, we look at something, and then we see it. We see it, and then we start to think about it, and we start to think, oh, well, that must be true, what I'm seeing. And then if we think about it long enough, we start to believe that it's true, and then we act on it. Okay, so everything starts with looking, seeing, thinking, believing it, and then acting it out. Everything, absolutely everything. So Samuel looked at Eliab, he saw him, and he instantly thought, because of the brain, whatever, his eyes saw a big strapping man and thought, well, this must be the king. And God said no, because God says, what? I see things differently. I'm not looking at outward, I'm looking at inward, and he's not the one. And so I love that principle is like, what are you looking at? So what are you looking at? Are you looking at the wrong thing, or are you looking at the God thing? Or is it even that you're looking at the thing through the filter of God? Because I think that's probably a better reality, because God filters things differently. We need to start seeing things the way God sees things. I love the Land Notes and Wardrobe. Everyone's seen the Land Notes and Wardrobe, for I'm massively around the end of it. Okay, right. So C.S. Lewis, absolute genius. You haven't seen it? You have seen it? Yeah, Belfast Boy, we love him. East Belfast, C.S. Lewis, we'll claim that one. Not the Titanic so much because it's sank, but we'll claim C.S. Lewis. But I love it. But he basically, in The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, does this amazing kind of thing where, if you know the story, the children go through the wardrobe, they're in this land of Narnia, they get to meet Aslan, who represents Jesus, and then at the end of that movie, they're basically crowned the kings and queens of Narnia. That was their destiny. They are kings and queens in Narnia. And then at the very end of the movie, they've got their wee crowns on, and they're having a wee afternoon on their horses, and they stumble across an old familiar thing that they remember subtly. And it's a lamppost, and they said, lamppost, like, and they start to go, this looks really familiar. And then they start to remember the word spare room, and the next thing they get off their horses and they're walking through, and they find themselves back through the wardrobe as kids again. So they're adults when they leave Narnia, and now they're kids fleeing the war, and like time has not stopped in that world. They're still playing hide and seek, which is how they ended up in the wardrobe. And there's this really weird thing when I watch that movie, and I'm like there's something really class about it, because the next movie, those kids are really wrestling because they have seen something. They have been part of this other world where they were kings, where they were queens, where they were reigning. And you see in the next movie, they're just struggling, and they see glimpses of Narnia. But then that's all it is, it's like a glimpse, and then of course they end up back there. But I think the whole point is this: what is true in the moment? Are they children escaping a war, or are they kings and queens of Narnia? What's the greater reality? Because this is where I think that we live our lives. Are we in this world, or are we reigning and ruling in a kingdom where we are citizens of heaven? And I love that the story of Narnia says it so poetically and beautifully and gives us a visual image for it. But I want to dare to believe that actually I'm a king and queen and not going through the mess, because I think that's what C.S. Lewis is trying to navigate our hearts towards. You are not part of this world. You're part of a different world. And he's saying there is so much more than what you see. I get it. Reality is very real. We hurt. We are afraid. We worry. We go through life. We have all this stuff happen, and it feels so real, and it is real in a sense. But I want you to dare to believe that there is a greater reality. There is a reality that we dare to believe to be true. And I think Jesus was amazing when he said, you know what, I want you to pray, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come here as it is there. And I think that that's the Narnia picture. It's like I want that to come here. So whilst we still live in this very present reality of cystic fibrosis, actually our prayer is for breakthrough, is that the heavens would break through and we would experience healing. Lily's healed up there, she's just not down here. And when I view it like that, everything changes. Lily, when she was 5 years old, prayed for herself. I came down in bed, that child has greater faith than I do. And she prayed this simple prayer. She said, Jesus, thank you there's no CF in heaven. Thank you there's no CF in me. Amen. And I was like, holy heavens, she is like 5 and has an amazing picture of what it is in heaven, because actually everything in heaven is perfect. We're not going to stop believing that perfect and perfection can impact here. We totally believe that the spiritual impacts the physical, and vice versa. Let me give you this to go back to our story, because I think this is phenomenal. I only discovered this 3 weeks ago when I was listening to a teaching, and I was like, oh my word, epic. So the Moses thing, right? So Moses never got into the promised land until something incredible happens in Mark chapter 9. If you read it, Mark chapter 9, he finds himself in a really strategic position with a really strategic person. And it's the transfiguration of Jesus, where Jesus goes up the mountain and he takes with him his 3 closest disciples, Peter, James, John, and they get to see that Jesus is standing at the epicenter of the city, of the promised land. And who is he standing there with? He's standing with Moses, and he's standing with Elijah. And it's this man, I just never noticed it before. Moses actually did get into the promised land, right? And I guarantee you that if you were to ask him, would he rather have got into the promised land with the millions of people who were moaning all the time, or would he rather stand there with the Son of God, with the true Messiah? Guaranteed in eternity, his answer will be Jesus. And I love that in our physical brain, we think Moses didn't get, but in the light of eternity, Moses did get. And it was a reminder to me that God never, ever fails on a promise. God never, ever, ever fails on a promise. What looks like a fail is never a fail. What looks like a fail is never a fail, because the promise of God is always true. And I even think about brothers and sisters who have walked a huge journey of faith for healing, and it looks, oh, well, that didn't work. That language isn't even the language of heaven, because I guarantee you that they're sitting in the presence of Jesus, and they're sitting with all eternity ahead of them. So I really hope today, as you leave this place, that actually you get a big picture perspective on your life, but walking through what you're walking through, there is so much more. And to try and see the world the way God views the world, to try and see your circumstances in light of eternity, that what looks like a fail, never a fail. But if He said it, He will do it. I guess the whole picture is, do we trust Him? Do we trust Him with our stories? Do we trust Him with the ending of our stories? I am a reader. Aaron cracks up with the amount of books in our house, but if you've ever got engrossed in a really good novel and you've got so fallen in love with the characters in the novel, one of my things, if I think there's something traumatic about to happen in the story, I'll flick forward a massive chunk to make sure that person's name is still there, because I'm like panicking for their safety. And I sometimes want to flick to the end of the book because I want to know what it's all about. The thing that I've realised about God is that sometimes, actually all of the time, He doesn't let us see the final page, but He's going, do you trust me with the pen? Do you trust me with the next line? The psalm that talks about your word is a lamp unto my feet is how we're supposed to live our lives. We're supposed to live our lives in the word of God. Back in ancient world times, people would have carried lights. They would have carried, so this verse takes on a whole new meaning, they would have carried lights in their hand. And it's not like today where you get to see, when you put your full beams on, you see the whole road. Their light in their hand literally extended to as far as their hand went. So they got to see an immediate area. They didn't get to see beyond that. It's whatever way the light held. And then they had enough for the next step, basically. That's the whole point. Your word is a lamp unto my feet means my word over your life is enough for your next step. Will you stop trying to figure out the last page? Will you stop trying to figure out the crossing the finish line? I want you to keep your promise for the one step that I have in front of you. And if you're faithful in that, then we're going to go another step. But what are we led by? Again, just like Joshua and the children of Israel, we're led by His promise, we're led by His word, and we are totally assured because of their story that His provision and that His power go with us. Amen?
It's a song called Beauty for Ashes, and I actually wrote this when I was on a mission trip in Cambodia, and I'd seen a load of crazy stuff. And you know the score, like you grow up in Belfast, you grow up during the Troubles, you see a lot of, you know what I'm saying, right? Riots and all that kind of stuff, right? But I'd never seen people being bought and sold. I'd never heard about the virginity trade. I mean, this is like 5 and 6 year olds. Like, this is crazy. Like, child brothels, all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, mind blown, genuinely mind blown. And I'm going to sing Go to the City after, which I wrote on a mission trip again in a different place, in Thailand. And I was sitting looking at these girls that are like 14 and 15 years old, and they're all being rescued out of some of the most horrific scenarios in life. And I was leading them in worship, and here they are being taught and being empowered how to bake these like super ornate cakes. And then they're being like micro enterprise and sent out into the world, and they all are safe, they're rescued, they've been rehabilitated. They're still in the process as well, obviously, and they know and love Jesus, right? And they know that they have a loving Heavenly Father, and that their relationship with God is a real thing too. And I just had this line that I just began to sing over them, and it was like, you've given us beauty for ashes, a love and a mercy that wipes our tears away. And so if you kind of wrote this in a perspective, if you're like a 5 or 6 year old kid, and the door, one of these wee, pink room things, whatever, child brothel rooms, is about to open, and you think, I'm about to be abused again, but it's actually not, it's rescue, right? And that's what the church is doing. The church in Southeast Asia is more feared than the police, right? Because it can't be bought and sold, and inherently in our DNA is love. Love God and love your neighbour, right? It's the same thing. And so the church is doing incredible works in the front lines. And And so I began to sing this over them, and it's just that picture. Then I finished it with a friend, and it's that picture. You know, it's like it's rescue, it's redemption, it's that journey in the middle of it. And I know in my own life, you know, I'm really great at causing chaos, and but God has always got this great way of bringing redemption and bringing beauty from amidst all of the ashes that are there. And so that's the background for this song. It's called Beauty for Ashes. Through this hurting, through this pain, the lonely and afraid, here in the darkness, hope is breaking through. Who is this one that saves, and who rescues from this grave? Oh, you've given me beauty for ashes, beauty for ashes. Oh, love and mercy that wipes our tears away. And you've given me hope for tomorrow and grace for today, and beauty for ashes always. Pull out of shadows and into light. Oh, a love I did not know, adopted when my father looked and saw a diamond in the coal. Oh, a diamond in the coal. Oh, you've given me beauty for ashes, beauty for ashes. Oh, love and mercy that wipes our tears away. You've given me hope for tomorrow, grace for today, and beauty for ashes always. I hear compassion's whisper, I sing redemption's song, and I feel the Father's kindness, and I have found where I belong. You are the one who holds me, in you the storm is gone, and all shadows prove their sunlight. Now the night gives away to dawn. No more am I rejected, and no more am I ashamed, and I stand as one forgiven, freedom found in Jesus' name. For I am your beloved, oh Jesus, your delight, and your name is our Father, and I am yours, and you are mine. Oh, Jesus, you are mine. Oh, you've given me beauty for ashes, beauty for ashes. Love and mercy that wipes our tears away. You've given me hope for tomorrow, grace for today, beauty for ashes always. You're the God of this city, and you're the King of these people.